In some Asian culture, the dragonfish are actually symbols of good health, prosperity, wealth, and power. And some of them even believe that it'll protect them from some misfortunes, and may even provide them with some good luck. Some even believe that when this fish dies, that it's died for you, giving its life to absorb your misfortune. Now, the dragonfish is also called the Asian Arowana. Now, there's three main color varieties of the Asian Arowana, which is the green, the gold, as well as the red. It was actually the red Arowana that earned them the name dragonfish in the first place. A combination of its large plated scales, huge mouth lined with teeth, barbels that resemble a forked tongue, long tail, widespread pectoral fins resembling wings, and red coloration that partly earned them the name dragonfish. In some Asian cultures, they actually believe the Asian Arowana is the reincarnation of the dragon. Now, to be fair, when Game of Thrones came out, dragons were my favorite part of that show. And then when House of the Dragon came out, I smirked, delusionally thinking that I actually have a real dragon. My first tattoo 21 years ago was a dragon. I've always been seemingly fascinated by dragons and the culture and beliefs surrounding them. And when it comes to my fish, I always find myself asking them a question, and that's simply, why are you the way that you are? Like, why are you shaped like that? Why is your color like that? Why is your pattern like that? Why do you act the way you do? And today we're gonna deep dive, or at least tell you some of the things that I love about the Asian Arowana and what makes them a real dragon. Look at the Asian Arawana's barbel, similar in appearance to a dragon's forked tongue, but actually used to detect movement at the water's surface, but also to draw in prey to think it might be food. Not only using those barbels as sensory organs, but also to allure prey and at last moment snatching on them. Then we have their long, slender body with a large tail and pectoral fins that are all designed for fast reactions and jumping powerfully out of the water to capture prey, almost flying, with those dragon wing-like pectoral fins. And when not in predatory mode, they will mesmerize you with their graceful and beautifully gliding through the water, yet still propelled through the water, almost slithering through it, dragon-esque with that body and beautiful finnage. As a member of the family Osteoglossidae, they are also some of the most primitive fishes living today. Some might say they're an ancient living species, like a dragon. In fact, the Asian Arowana dates back to the late Cretaceous period, which is 60 to 100 million years ago. Yeah, these guys actually existed when the T-Rex did. Maybe even real dragons were there too. You see, Arowana and Arapaima are both members of the Osteoglossidae, which is also known as the bony tongue, which essentially means that their tongue and the roof of their mouth hold most of their teeth. With a large gaping mouth that reminds me of a drawbridge, similar to a dragon, that opens up and snatches anything small enough to fit in it, they then use that tongue to not only hold the prey firmly, but also move it quickly into their throat. These guys usually eat everything in one bite, similar to me, but also a dragon. Scales nothing short of armor plating like a dragon that of course aids in defense of the Arowana, as well as temperature control with a singular unobstructed lateral line running through the middle of the scales, used to detect movement, vibration, and pressure changes in the water, almost like a sonar system. Or better yet, incredibly sensitive ears, like a dragon was said to have. And then of course the cherry on top. That's a good one, cherries are red. Their coloration, red, like most dragon depictions. But why are they red and what purpose does that serve? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I think you'll find this interesting. The longest island river in the world is found on Borneo Island, and this is where the red Asian Arowana hails from. This deep and wide river is warm and slightly acidic. The river bottom is actually a fine sandy substrate with very little plant debris or even rocks. Yeah, that's right, the Asian Arowana does best in a big tank with next to nothing in it. Now this water is dark or even slightly red due to the high tannin content from the peat and plants dying and their remnants. And due to that dark and slightly red water, we know that the red in the red Arowana is an adaptation to the conditions for its survival as opposed to diet, breeding, or display purposes. In this habitat, the red color makes it easier to disguise when hunting prey. Now, the green and the gold are found in different locations, but their diets are virtually the same. Their breeding habits and ways they do it, nothing changes. The only thing that changes from variation of arowana is the environment. What an absolutely phenomenal fish, friend, and even guardian of the gallery. And that, my friends, is why the 2,000 gallon is the true House of the Dragon. Sorry, I don't know where else I'm gonna go with this. The Asian arowana obviously is called the dragonfish for obvious reasons, and I truly believe it is the reincarnation of the dragon, regardless of what anybody else thinks. I love that side of that hobby. Keeping Asian arowana is like a hobby within a hobby, if you know what I'm talking about. Let's keep this going though. Where can you get an Asian arowana? Can you keep one? Why do they cost so much? And what's the best arowana you should keep? First and foremost, let me start off by saying I cannot tell you how many people tell me from the States, and 50% of you guys watching this right now are American. You can't keep them in the United States, but we'll get to that and we'll talk about why. I get so many messages, so many comments. You don't know what you're talking about. I see Asian arowana in the pet store all the time. They're not illegal. I can buy one for 50 bucks. Automatic red flags. I already know what you're talking about. And here's the fun fact. There's multiple species of arowana. They're found all over the world. For example, in South America, there's the silver as well as the black. In Australia, there's the Jardini as well as the Saratoga. We can go to Africa and find the African arowana. What a common name, what a great name for that. And then, of course, the Asian arowana. That's 6 species there, which is the Formosus. But now they've discovered the Scriptus, so that's 7 in total. And what you're probably seeing is probably most likely the silver. Very common, 20 to 100 bucks, and you can keep them anywhere in the world. But why can't you keep the Asian arowana? I'm going to summarize this. Too long, didn't read. You cannot keep the Asian arowana in a lot of countries because they're delicious. You see, this fish is not only protected by the Endangered Species Act, but it's also listed as Appendix 1 with cities, which is the most severe, of the 3 appendices, which are ranked based off of how severe or how much protection that animal or plant requires. I think it was like in the late 60s or early 70s where they started to notice that the Asian arowana was declining rapidly in its population, and it was simply due to overfishing, as well as destruction of their natural habitat, because we love to build bridges and dams and wharfs and whatever else we can put in the water to transport our goods, but at the cost of the local fauna, and then sometimes it can devastate animals within it. You see, at that point, more people were eating the Asian arowana than they were keeping it in the home aquarium. Anyways, the numbers of them were rapidly declining, pushing them to near extinction. So I think it was 1975, 183 countries got together and signed a treaty classifying it as a banned or endangered species, banned from international trade. Now comes along CITES, which is the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. Now they list it as Appendix 1, which is most severe, which means that it's listed as threatened with extinction, which may or may not be affected by trade, which of course is hobbyist related as well as food consumption. Anyways, translation for all of that, it's not the aquarium hobby's fault, but we're certainly not helping. But why do I have one? And why do many people in Canada have one and other countries all over the world? Well, governments interpret laws and have their own rules and regulations for everything. And when it comes to Canada, so long as the fish comes from a CITES certified farm, meaning that this fish is at least 3 generations removed from the wild, you can have it with the proper permits and imports, etc. In the United States, no. Do I think it's necessary? I think that you guys should, or Americans should, at least have the same laws as Canada when it comes to this sort of thing. But a little piece of me thinks, well, I don't want everybody to have them. I just want to have them. That is entirely selfish, and I don't regret it. I think it would just come down to supply and demand, and prices for Asian arowana would go up, but we wouldn't necessarily affect the wild population. Nobody wants to fish them anymore. Nobody's eating them, and nobody's going to buy wild-caught fish. We all want them properly and to import them properly and responsibly, because if you don't, if you've ever seen the video I made before, you can face up to 3 years in prison, I believe, or 5, and a $10,000 fine for importing cities listed Appendix 1 Asian arowana. So that's why you can't have one. But why are they so expensive? Even if Canada, there's not many people here, there's 10 times in the United States. It simply comes down to, well, let's look at how the Asian arowana breeds in the first place. And if you were to get a pair, good luck. How long is it going to take for you to get viable fry to sell? Well, an Asian arowana takes approximately like 4 years to sexually mature. Once the female does lay eggs and pairs up with a proper male, the male's going to fertilize them, scoop them up in his mouth. Then once in his mouth, it's going to take about 1 month for those eggs to hatch. Once they hatch, they're mouth brooders. The males actually have the bigger jaws, so you can kind of determine their sex once they become mature, but it takes years. With those wigglers, I guess, in their mouths, it takes about another 3 months for them to absorb their yolk sac before the male spits them out. And then the culling process takes place. And they're only laying on an average maybe 30 to 50 eggs in the first place. So very low yield, plus they have to cull, which means you take out the undesirables or deformed ones or ones that don't have a long life expectancy, etc. You don't want to flood the market with just anything, especially when your reputation is on the line as a farm and there's not that many of them. And you're left with what, 20 fish? It's kind of like discus. Discus take a long time to raise to sexual maturity, and then their breeding process, and then you have a low yield of fry, etc. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into it. But let's say I want to start a farm. Of course, I'm going to have to buy land. I'm going to have to get all the permits. I'm going to have to farm that land, turn it into ponds that are viable, let them age, figure out how I'm going to get Asian arowana to stock them in with pairs. You're investing decades and Lord knows how much money into this to one day be able to distribute, which isn't that easy either. Basically coming down to supply and demand. Is there a relatively low supply? I think a lot of people think that Asian arowana are no longer endangered. That's probably the case. But the demand is so high. If I told you you can get an Asian arowana tomorrow, even if they're $3,000 to $5,000, I know plenty of people that are going to get them and will just drain those farms dry, which is going to drive the prices up. So of course, Asian arowana costing thousands of dollars each is due to the process that it takes as well as supply and demand. So you can't get an Asian arowana. What can you get, or what do I recommend you get based off the list I told you earlier? I'm going to rank them best to worst. In my opinion, the Asian arowana is number 1. I'm a little biased and I know you can't get one. So the second best, if you want one that looks like an Asian arowana, you go for the Jardini, or the Saratoga. They have very similar body shape, but they lack the coloration. Similar scales, similar look to them, and it's the closest looking one to the Asian arowana. But it comes at a price. They are nasty. Not expensive though. Instead, I would recommend the black arowana from South America. It only gets to about 2 feet in length. The Asian arowana can grow up 30 to 36 potentially. I'm more in the class of 30 inches, 24 to 30 inches. The silver gets up to 4 feet, develops drop-eye where its eye sockets almost fall out and look at the ground. Very susceptible to that, but the black rarely ever gets that. Plus it says relatively smaller, and as adults they're almost virtually identical to a silver. Downside is they can cost a little bit more, usually like $100 to $200, maybe even a little bit more depending on your location. So Asian arowana, black arowana, and then I go silver. I go silver for a specific reason. I think the silver is going to be more accessible, but they do get up to 4 feet. These guys get absolutely monstrous. You're going to need a massive tank, tight-fitting lid. You can't keep anything with it that'll fit in its mouth because, like you've seen, it's going to eat it. But why not the Jardini or the Saratoga? I just think they're too nasty, so they rank even lower. And then finally, the African arowana. One of the more rarer arowanas, but don't really look like an arowana. If you're kind of into that appearance, you can get it. But I'm more of a purist and I want it to look as close to an Asian arowana or at least a silver arowana as possible. So of course I go Asian, black, silver, probably Jardini, no, Saratoga, Jardini, African. Oh, and then you can put Scriptus up with the Asians, but they're not as colorful, so maybe right above black or right below it. Asian. Okay, that's enough. I hope you enjoyed this video. I tried to dump as much information as possible. I've made tons of videos on how to keep them and how to even build their homes and everything else you could possibly imagine. And if you enjoy these videos, make sure you comment, subscribe, like the video, and whatever else you're supposed to do. But highly recommend checking out the members only section of this channel so you can not only get a more behind the scenes and in-depth look at everything that I'm doing, but also participate at least to an extent. But I will warn you, I probably make more videos there than I do here because they're far more easier to make because it feels like I'm just making a video for my friend. Speaking of friends, if you want to be my friend, where is it? You should buy my book, The Ultimate Do-It-Yourself Handbook for the Do-It-Yourself Aquarist. Pick this up and truly unlock your hobby. Anyways, all the links are in the description. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.